The Canadiens stumbled to the quarter mark of the NHL season in year 3 of their rebuild with a worse record than they had in each of the last 2 seasons. What's the biggest concern? We'll discuss that and much more on this week's Hockey Inside Out show. Hi there and welcome to the Hockey Inside Out show. I'm Stu Cowan of the Gazette. I want to start this week's show by passing on our deepest condolences to Chris Nyland, a regular on the show here, as you all know, and his family on the death of his mother this week. Chris is with his family in Boston, and Sergio Momesso joins us in his place this week with Rick Green. They were teammates, along with Chris, on Montreal's 1986 Stanley Cup team. Rick, I know you were at Tuesday's game at the Bell Center when the Canadiens lost 3-2 in overtime to the Utah Hockey Club, and the Habs had only 13 shots on goal. What's your biggest concern with this team, Rick?
Well, the concern is just a lack of intensity. They just look disinterested, and they've forgotten, what they need to do to find a way to maybe, show up every night. And I mean, they lost so many one-on-one battles. They weren't in that mode of wanting to make the difference, each and every guy there. I mean, you take a look at Slavkovsky and Doc. Unfortunately, they're trying to get these guys going, but they are not showing much interest in making a difference. And there's just too many guys that are not playing up to their capabilities, and they're not that great a hockey club when you have so many passengers. And it's tough to watch when they continually kind of show up, but not really paying the price on what they need to do to be competitive. And it's not a very good situation with what they have with that group right now.
I know, Sergio, you had a front row seat, I believe, to the Vegas game when the Canadiens lost 6-2 at the Bell Center. Your thoughts just on what's going on here?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've noticed, I haven't been watching all the games, but, they've lost a handful of games by big scores. And you see once a couple go by that the team gets down and they're dejected. And I get it as you go along. When you don't score a lot of goals, and they're obviously giving up a lot of goals, it's got to go one way or the other. You either got to score more, or you definitely have to defend. And Rick said it, and everyone sees it. Defending has been a tough thing for the team this year, and you got to commit. You got to commit to stop and start and blocking shots and doing all those little things to keep the puck out of the net. And you see that. One-on-one, they get beat, and then they commit to the other player, and they leave somebody else all alone from the net. And that game in Vegas, I happened to be sitting behind the net with a friend of mine who had seats there in the second period, and that's where Montembeault was in nets. And honestly, I think maybe one goal, but the rest of the goals, you couldn't blame Montembeault. There were point-blank shots. There was coverage where two guys went on one guy, and then shot in the slot area, and a really nice goal. So there was a few that, most of them he really couldn't do anything about. And I know there's other games where he's struggled. And obviously Primo doesn't look like he's ready for the NHL level, which they all hoped he would. So it's a really tough situation. You have Montembeault, who's the number one, but you can't play him all the time. And then if he's not playing at his best, then it really looks like they don't, have a chance in games. And when you don't, they were supposed to be built to be a team in the future, and it's not looking right now, obviously, to hold on to the puck, to carry the puck, to play like a Tampa Bay used to play, or the Chicago Blackhawks when they were winning, and the speed and the defense coming up into the play and scoring goals, but they're not. And defending in their own zone is they had a few games where they tightened it up. They're missing an identity, Stu, and what is their identity? Like Rick was saying, Utah, that's the old Phoenix team. That they're going to work hard. They never had a big budget. Maybe in years to come, they'll get a bigger budget in Utah with the new owner and add some more talented players. But they know they have to play a certain way to compete and win games. And they have a certain identity. You know what you're going to get when you play against that team. They're going to work hard, and you're going to have to work hard to beat them. And the Canadiens have to match that to any team that they play. They have a chance.
The work ethic has been questionable. I mean, they have so many young guys, Sergio, young players. Now, Rick, when you came into the league, you already came to Montreal, I should say. You already had experience in Washington. Sergio, you came here as a young kid who grew up in Montreal. Just how difficult can you relate to what these young guys are going through now, breaking into the NHL with the Canadiens in this market?
Well,
I think it's well. You're asking me, Stu. I think it's different.
Go ahead, Rick. Sergio, Rick, you can go. Go ahead, Sergio.
So just for me as a rookie, the difference is we had a lot of veteran players to guide us. Rick is one of them. Obviously, Knuckles was there, but we had Bob Gainey, we had Larry Robinson, like Bobby Smith. I mean, you go down the list. There was a lot of veteran players that were able to, like, we can go out and make mistakes and work hard. We had the backing, Claude Lemieux and Stéphane Richer and obviously Patrick Roy, and but I was going to mention that, and there was a couple of things I was going to mention when you say that. Is one thing I remember Bob Gainey telling me. He says, because when you're just in the league, it's like, hey, this is great. You can kind of let loose and play your game, and you're going to get a little bit of leeway because you're so young. These guys are trying to win while they're young, with not that many veteran players in the lineup. Yeah, you have some veteran players, but not guys that are really going to make the difference on the ice as well. So, that's a tough thing. And Bob Gainey told me, he says, you want to play a long time in the league, you don't have to be great every game, but you have to be good, consistent. And that's something that stuck with me. And that's the biggest thing, as a young player, you're not consistent. You can look great one game and then really, maybe I won't, I'll just go through the motions. Because if I did that in junior, I can get away with it, but you can't do that in the NHL. And you learn as you get older. There's so many players that go in and out of the league, right? 3 years, 4 years, then you don't see them anymore. But consistency, when you see a guy playing 16 years and, a long career, there's a reason for that. And he's, he takes his job seriously and plays with pride. And at least, to be consistent is the hardest thing. And that's something that the young guys got to learn, and quickly, that even though they're younger, they have to put in the effort, like we say, and be at least consistent so they have a chance to win games.
Rick, what were you going to say there?
Yeah, I was going to say, with a young team, there's a certain fragility that comes with it. And, that being said, there's something that you can control. I don't care if you're a rookie or you're a veteran guy, and that's effort and determination and wanting to make the difference. And if you don't have that mindset as a group, and of course, it's a little more difficult for the younger guys to understand what they need to do each night, still learning, the tricks of the trade of playing in the NHL. If you have some good veteran guys that are doing it, yes, that's going to help them. But, you can't continually talk about their youth and using that totally as an excuse for not being able to perform and being able to compete each shift and each night. And that's the only way that they're going to get better, is guys showing up and showing determination. And, you talk about identity. The Canadiens had an identity before, where we used to talk about, wow, these guys are competing every night. They're going to be tough to play against. They're going to be coming at you. We don't see that anymore. And we don't see enough of it. We don't see enough guys doing it. And they have a problem with that as a group and individuals, that they're not getting it done. And, no more excuses now. Let's, control your effort, control your willingness to pay the price to make the difference between winning and losing. And if you don't, you're going to continue to lose, and you're going to end up, giving up situations that shouldn't be happening each and every night. And, I think patience is, yes, part of the process, but, show up with effort and determination and want to make the difference and care about what's going on.
I think I want to add to that, Stu, if I can. I mean,
yep,
I think that, I think they need a little bit of help right now. I'm sure Kent Hughes is kind of looking around to see where a veteran defenseman, stabilize something back there a little bit more. Like if I look at the D, not everybody can play every night in that lineup. There's maybe 3 guys, maybe 4, but the other guys they're in and out guys.
I think they're really missing Sean Monahan too, like that type of player, right?
And a forward as well. So
Yeah.
like a couple of guys, one in the back and one in the front that have some experience. 27, 28 years, not easy to find right now. But I'm just saying that they need a little bit of a guy to fill in a gap here and there. Nothing against Jake Evans and these guys, but if they're playing second line, I mean that shows that there's holes here and there. And I know Marty's trying to do different things, put guys on different lines and trying to get them going. But that's something there. And another thing, my dad is like these young guys. The last year and a half, all the core players, they all signed big deals. And they're good, they're set, and sometimes you get a big deal and you kind of just say, okay, I'm good, I'm set, but you still have to come up and come up with the goods. I don't know if the pressure is a little bit on them as well. I'm sure that's part of it, but then eventually the fact of people always said, where's the best place you played? I said, well, if you're winning, you're happy. And if you're not happy. And so you gotta not like obviously hate to lose, but you gotta get out there and do something about it. And yeah, that's what they
I
had
heard
to
Bruce
find
Bruce
that.
Boudreau on TSN the other night. And he was saying $60 million can make a lot of guys lazy.
Yeah. So
Rick, you've been a player and a coach. Is there concern with you that players might be starting to tune out Marty St. Louis?
Well, when you see the way that the guys are competing or not competing, it comes down to the coach. It's just the nature of the business. They're in control of trying to get these guys ready to play each night and get the most they can get out of them. And if it's not happening, then there's problems, and the problems usually come back to the coach. And again, we talk about players buying into a system. Players will buy into a system providing they see it works. Mm-hmm. And consistently, when it's not working, then you have some problem areas, and then guys are starting to, not follow the program. And I see, and we touched on it before, some confusion on responsibility with and without the puck, and is resulting in really, really bad breakdowns. And unfortunately, as Mo probably knows, never trust a forward in front of the net because they don't know how to play in front of the net. And, there's a chance that you're going to get a good chance of getting scored on, or, just basic breakdowns. And I'll continue to harp on it that they have to figure that and get that thing straightened out, so there's a clear understanding of what everybody should be doing and when they should be doing it.
Well, following up on that a bit, Sergio, Jimmy Montgomery, Montreal native, bilingual. I imagine you probably know him, maybe from St. Louis days or whatever. But he was available after Boston fired him. Got picked up pretty quickly by St. Louis. Did the Canadiens miss an opportunity there, Sergio, of maybe not trying to bring Montgomery here, either to help Marty or in some form?
Well, obviously what happened in Boston, he had so many, he had good seasons and then just couldn't get to the next step. So they have a big expectation there to go further. And you see even Boston right now, I think they lost 2-0 last night or the other night. So they're having trouble scoring goals, but they were always tough they defended very well, and they had 2 very good goalies. And obviously they lost one that went to Ottawa, but they still have a good team, so it wasn't good enough for him, and he wins the first game that he goes to St. Louis. I think Marty has a little more slack. I think Kent Hughes, because they hired him, and this is the way that they want to go. But I will say, if this continues to be really bad going into January and after Christmas, I don't think his job is safe. I mean, nobody's job is safe, right, in this business. So I think if it was later in the year, maybe that could have happened. or might have happened if that offer was there. But I think that obviously that Kent Hughes understands that if things don't change, he's the boss. He's going to have to make a move. So I think if it doesn't work out, if he doesn't see that things got better, I believe it would happen this year.
Yeah, the fact it didn't, I think, just shows how committed that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon are to Marty, because it sort of reminded me when Claude Julien got fired by Boston in 2017, and Marc Bergevin came in pretty quickly and picked him up and fired Michel Therrien. He was, coaching candidates in Montreal are limited, right? Because they have to be able to speak French, and they made that move pretty quickly. Although Montgomery might not have wanted to come here. Pat Hickey reported that Montgomery's wife was from St. Louis. He has a house there. He's very comfortable there. He might not have wanted to come here anyway. I mean, Pascal. They have Pascal Vincent in Laval now, and Laval is doing really well, so they have an option if they do decide they want to move on.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But Rick, do you think Marty's job is safe?
Well, at this point, yes, they praise he's the kind of guy that they want to have, and they're just kind of have to bite the bullet and go through the process and the growing pains of what they're dealing with. But one thing will never change, and that's look at Montgomery, obviously a great winning record. In Boston, he had quite a changeover of his personnel, and the players a lot of times can make a coach look pretty good, and
they can also turn on him too, though. Rick, we saw Brad Marchand fighting and arguing with Montgomery on the bench.
Yeah, well, the players basically run the show, and if there's a mutiny to be had, the players will definitely rally the troops to make things really, really not pleasant for a guy, especially when you're struggling. But Marty, there's a lot of positive from what I understand with what they like in him, but that's not saying that. Listen, it comes a point where you got to get the results, and you have to have the structure and the direction going the right way. Otherwise, just the nature of the business. We know what happens.
Do you guys remember a player-coach argument on the bench back in your playing days or coaching days, Rick?
I think Chelly was one that didn't sit on his hands or his tongue when it came down to responding. As far as anything, loud and a real big confrontation, I don't recall a lot. But off the ice, there was some things that went on, like Pat Burns throwing an ashtray at John Kordick down the hallway because he had a little discussion with him that he didn't like the way it went. So, it's different today, but still the players are the one that dictate a lot of the success of the team. And if you get caught as a coach not riding that wave, it's not a pleasant scenario.
So I know times have changed. They actually had ashtrays in the building back then, right? Sergio, you remember any specific disagreements you had with a coach during your career?
Well, I had a few with Brian Sutter.
Yeah.
I know the one story you were saying, but that wasn't like a disagreement. That's the first time he said, "I want you to play with Adam Oates and Brett Hall." And I was like, okay, this will be good. I'll get a lot of ice time. I'll be on the first line in the first power play. But he said, I need you to be the first forechecker to get in there and get in front of the net, and you'll get a lot of goals there. And then I'm like, yeah. But he goes, those guys don't play very well in their own end. I need you to be the first guy back in your own end. And I said, well, I don't think that's going to work. He said, how am I going to be the first guy in and the first guy back, And then he kind of realized what he said, that didn't make sense. And he started laughing after talking to me about 5 minutes. And then, I ended up playing on that line. It didn't go great the first game, but it went well that year. Actually, I had my best year offensively wise. And obviously Brett was a scoring machine, 60, 70, one time over 80 goals. So I saw a lot of goals, and I had arguments with, we had arguments in those days. We'd push each other on the bench and get in each other, to push each other. And that's what happens. You can't always have the coach yell at you. It's up to the players to push each other. And those are usually the captains, the assistant captains, the veteran players to push everyone else to be better on the ice because we have a standard that we want to keep winning. And St. Louis, when I got traded there, was it was a little bit different. There was a lot of good forwards, but speaking of Brett, like we could score, but we'd give up a lot of goals. And until we started to tighten up, we had to learn how to do that as well. And so there was arguments. We had fights in Detroit one night where I got into a fight with Joey Kosher, and Scott Stevens was on our team, and he kind of clipped Fedorov, which obviously started a bit of a brawl. And Bob Probert was roaming the ice, and I jumped on top of him. So because he jumped on top of Scott Stevens, and Brian Sutter got mad at me because I didn't fight Bob Probert. I said, well, Scott Stevens could take care of himself, and I ended up fighting Joey Kosher. So I got into an argument with him actually in the dressing room after. I couldn't believe that he was actually upset at me after I went in to protect Scott Stevens. It's not like he's a small guy. He knew what he did. You're going to clip Fedorov? Well, you could take care of yourself. And I know that Scott Stevens was a valuable defenseman for the club, but if he's going to play that way, he'll be able to take care of himself. So I didn't respect that from Brian after. So we had a heated discussion after the game. Honestly, God, I was like already livid after having a fight. So you don't want to talk to anybody once you're in that mode. It's like
your Italian blood was boiling, Sergio.
Well, listen, I was out in survival mode out there. It wasn't an easy task, and I did what I did, and I didn't even start it. So protect other players, but I didn't like that. So that we got into a big argument there, and for a couple of days, almost a week, we didn't even speak to each other. Bob Berry was assistant coach at the time when he left Montreal, and he just kind of said, "Don't worry, Mo, just let it blow over." And I go, he's wrong. And he says, yeah, I know, and this and that. But, the assistant coach is kind of the middle ground guy.
Yeah.
So he hears all the stories. And but one of the best stories, one of the good stories that make you laugh was Brett Hall when he started to he always got the leeway because he could score 2-3 goals a game. And then Brian would give it to everyone else except he had his few guys that he would not. And that was the end of the situation where you got to be able to give it to your top players when they're not playing well too, because or else the other players won't respect you. And I think there came a point where, and we were in Detroit again. It was happening in Detroit. It was another game, and we were getting beat pretty badly. And he started giving it to Brett on the ice because he was just awful in his own end. And Brett wasn't listening, and he just said, well, I'll do what I want to do, sort of thing. So they were having a heated argument. I loved it. I thought it was great. I didn't agree with Brett, but I liked the fact that he was arguing with Brian, and he was boiling. And Brett said, watch this. And he went on the ice, and I was playing with him on the same line, and I went, and me and Adam played, and then we got off, and Brett stayed on the ice, and then the next two went out there, and the right winger stood up, but he had to sit down again because Brett stayed out there. And then the third line went out there, and he wouldn't change, and that was his thing. So just to get Brian going nuts, and he was going crazy on the bench, and he couldn't skate anymore. Like, he was out there for 3.5, 4 minutes, and I think his defenseman took about freaking 5-6 shots from the blue line, and Brett couldn't move, and he wasn't blocking a shot, and it was like, and Brian was just trying to get a whistle. Like, he couldn't believe that there still wasn't a whistle. Honest to God, the fourth line got on the ice, and Brett was still out there. I mean, my turn was coming up next again, and then finally he grabbed the other guy, the right winger. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Tony Twist or somebody. He says, and he just kind of threw them on the ice. So we had too many men on the ice just so we can get a whistle. And then when he came to the bench, he told Brett to serve the penalty, and Brett just looked at him and says, "I don't serve penalties." Oh, so that was like, it became a big story. Obviously, Stu, the next day in St. Louis, it was a big story. It was either like, it was Brett Hall against Brian Sutter, and the big stars. Unfortunately, they win the battle, and but I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it watching that go that night, because I was still pissed at Brian from the argument I had with him maybe 2 weeks earlier.
Well, back to the Habs here, Rick. When you were playing, there's sort of a belief that this is U.S. Thanksgiving weekend. The Canadiens play afternoon games Saturday in New York, Sunday in Boston. Sort of a belief that if you're not in a playoff spot at U.S. Thanksgiving, it's hard to get back in. Was that something as a player and a coach you guys sort of looked at, Rick, or believed?
Well, yeah, I mean, it just, Thanksgiving or maybe 2 weeks before or whatever. It's a case of just, where your team is at that particular time of the year. After you get a pretty good reading with, some of the guys that you have as a group, what they're doing, what kind of job they're doing at the 20 game mark. To put your finger on, this maybe is a turning point or not. You get a better reading and better understanding of what you have as a group and where this group is going. But you look at the Canadiens. What I see generally, over this 20 game period is the inconsistency and their inability to put together an intense 60-minute game and giving up way too many chances against. That's not going to bide well for them, on the next stretch of games.
Well, I know when the Blues won the Cup, it was 2019, where they were like the worst team in the NHL after Christmas, and they came back. But I mean, that's a different team than the Canadiens. Sergio, do you see any signs or hopes that the Canadiens can turn this around a bit and maybe be in the mix for like playing meaningful games in March and April?
Well, there's it's the way you're playing, right? You can get on a roll and you're playing well. You're getting chances, let's say, but you're not scoring or whatever it might be, and everything is there, but you deserve to win, and you're just not getting it done. Maybe a little bit of bad luck, or the goalie had a great night the night before where you outshot them and deserve to win, but that's not happening. They're not losing because of that. They're losing because they're defending all the time in their own end, and not having enough shots, and though that's the concerning part. If you look at that, and they always look, don't look at the shots, look at the chances. Which is, yes, they had chances. Let's say last night against Utah, they hit a couple of goalposts. They were a little bit unlucky but this is a team that. You're playing Utah, so those are teams that it could go either way. And then when they play the better teams you saw against Vegas, it's just some other teams that are at a different level. You could see the difference. So they definitely, we should break it down in 5 to 10 game segments, let's say, and and say, okay, well, if we're playing 10 games, if we have 14 points, that's our at least that's what we need to have, and and then the next 10 games, and they're at the point where they got to win 8 out of 10 just to get back into the 500 mode. So there's really an urgency right now until Christmas. I didn't look at the whole schedule, but I know up until Christmas they play a lot of home games in December, quite a few home games in December, and then they always take off for 2 weeks during that Christmas period, and then it's always a tough one, right? Heading down to Florida and then going somewhere else and then playing some games.
Place or in Vegas on New Year's Eve. It's always
exactly so, and those trips never. For the last years, I know I've been traveling with the team many, many years, and they always struggled on those 2-week long trips. So they got to rack up the points if they're going to have a chance up from now till they get on that massive road swing right after or just before and after Christmas. That's going to tell the story.
The Canadiens ask for that schedule over Christmas because they want to bring in other events at the Bell Center or Cirque du Soleil or whatever it is. So it's their choice, and it does seem to be a killer every year, and it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. I mean, as of now, it looks like the Canadiens are more in the mix for the number 1 overall pick again at next year's draft than they are for being in the playoffs. Well, that's it for this week's Hockey Inside Out show. I'd like to again pass along our condolences to Chris Nyland and his family, and thank you, Sergio, for filling in. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks,
We'll be back with a new show next week. In the meantime, please make sure you like and subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out YouTube channel. Go to montrealgazette.com/newsletters to sign up for the Hockey Inside Out newsletter. And of course, go to hockeyinsideout.com where you'll get all the latest Canadiens news every day. Also, please leave comments in the comment section below. We always like to hear what you think about the show. We'll see you again next week.